welcome to ITG Talks. My name is Anastasia Laurina, and now I'm joined by Mr. Rick Fawn, Professor, University of St. Andrews, United Kingdom. Warm welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining ITG Talks. Well, Professor Fawn, you were recently in Armenia during the election period, actually before the elections took place. What was the mood on the ground, and did it differ from the way the country is often portrayed abroad?
I first have to say that I couldn't speak comprehensively, that is, with everybody. We need to be realistic on that. But certainly the perceptions I had, and I had the opportunity to hear and speak with many Armenian analysts as well as some other people. I mean, the first thing is that I think there was total understanding that this was an absolutely pivotal, unprecedented election. And the foreign policy orientation of the country was an absolutely major issue. There were other issues as well, but the understanding that this was deciding possibly big picture developments for the future was, I think, clear to most people.
Professor, to what extent was this election really about Armenia's geopolitical orientation rather than domestic politics?
I think the orientation is certainly part of that. That is unquestionable. I think, as with any election, people are concerned with their well-being, daily matters, and so on. But I think this one was something where a different orientation, different opportunities were part of that package. I think that was very, very clear.
But can Armenia realistically deepen ties with the EU while maintaining essential economic links with Russia?
Well, this is a fantastic question. It's a tremendous challenge, there's no question. And I think it's important to underline that a few in Armenia would want outright provocations to Russia. Perhaps some of the government's policies are seen that way. But I think everybody understands that Russia is there, that it's an essential entity. And in some ways, the Russian government made that economic relationship all the more obvious in the lead up to the election itself. And that included statements from the Russian president, the Russian foreign minister, many other officials about Armenia, frankly, needing to choose, and also the imposition of de facto sanctions and reference to the many Armenians who live, who work, send remittances back, who live and work in Russia and send remittances back to Armenia. So I think everybody understands that Russia is there, and I don't think that a hostile future relationship is what is aimed for by anybody. But strengthening, let's call it that, strengthening relations with the West, yes, that is clearly part of this government's agenda, and that can be a tremendously beneficial relationship. It doesn't have to be zero-sum. And I think it's extremely important to underline, especially perhaps those in Moscow, that these are not necessarily mutually exclusive relationships. And I also say, probably in the center of that foreign policy reorientation is the European Union. I mean, there are particular countries in mind, and the United States as well, of course, but the relations with the European Union are multifaceted. They take on many different forms. They can be access, for example, to youth programs, to education, trade opportunities, all sorts of things like that are just simply beneficial for societies, and do not and should not be read as some sort of geopolitical complication. Not at all.
Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan campaigned on peace and regional normalization. Does the election result strengthen the prospects for an Armenia-Azerbaijan peace agreement?
Yeah, these are excellent questions. They're very big questions. So on the first, yes, I mean, Moscow has very explicitly said exactly what you did, that Armenia, this government, has to choose between the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union. And whether we completely agree with it or not, the Pashinyan government's position is that it's not necessarily a choice. But I think the starting point for that is there's simply no way that Yerevan is going to get a massive trade agreement, let alone EU accession right now, or probably for years to come. So in some ways, it's a very relevant question, but it's also a moot, a slightly artificial question, because the EU side of this is not immediately on the agenda. at all. And of course, Armenia trading with its neighbors, with Eurasian Economic Union countries, is very, very important. I mean, what I would really say to that is that if the Russian government wants to encourage those relations, the last thing it should do is put these de facto sanctions on core Armenian exports, mineral water, alcohol, agricultural produce, and so forth. So I would actually think it would be very wise on Moscow's stance to reverse that and make economic relations more attractive to Armenia, because this is something that I think people on the ground are very much aware. And this means, for many, many Armenians, it means benefits in daily life. There's no question that Russia is this gigantic market, an essential market. So Moscow actually has a great chance to spoil relations further, right? So it's not an either or at the moment. It most certainly is not. And then in terms of relations with Azerbaijan, I think this is really an historic opportunity for both countries. I mean, of course, there are issues, and that's very understandable because this has been a horrendous conflict stretching over decades. We know very, very well the enormous human cost. I mean, Azerbaijan having so many hundreds of thousands of displaced people, and people I know now who are of another generation who have longed to go back and see their families and ancestral homes and so forth. I really, from my point of view, I would really stress that I think this is a real time to build on the peace prospects. It may sound presumptuous of me to say this, but I said in Armenia that I thought President Aliyev's address to the European political community was an extremely important thing in itself, but also in the contents of what the president said. So I think the opportunities here, and there was a mutually supportive statement in that, that Armenia and Azerbaijan were working together on having that position said at the European political community. And let's not lose sight of what that is. That's 47 countries, and in this case, plus Canada. Now, that's a very, very big statement. And I think the European Union has a lot of goodwill to the region, a lot of interest in seeing prosperity develop. I think also this would be a great opportunity for the EU to stump up, to give even more. We know, of course, in 2022, there was that very important memorandum of understanding between the European Union and Azerbaijan. I think it's actually on the EU side to do more with that. And of course, that means geographically now linking in Armenia in a way that did not happen, was not possible for decades. So now we potentially have this pivotal situation, which in many ways is a parallel to the 1990s when the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan idea was formulated and then physically brought into practice. But now with the opportunity of bringing Armenia into that. And I think this is potentially a real win-win.
The United Kingdom has growing interests in energy connectivity and regional stability in the South Caucasus. Could improved Armenia-Azerbaijan relations create new opportunities for broader UK engagement in the region?
Well, personally, I would love to see that. I think that would be really quite ideal. And of course, you will know, and your viewers will know, that the UK is a very major foreign investor in Azerbaijan, leading country there because of the hydrocarbons, other things as well, but especially that. So the connections are very, very strong. And the ideal would be that Britain continue to build regional possibilities as well. And I would add also, I mean, this is a way for Britain to be that much more European, because the EU, the EPC, they are deeply interested in the South Caucasus. Britain is part of that equation, and therefore it is a place that Britain should continue to be deeply involved in and make the possibilities for prosperity, greater prosperity, that much more real.
Absolutely. Given the ongoing escalation in the Gulf and the wider Middle East, do you believe the Middle Corridor has gained additional strategic significance as a reliable alternative route connecting Asia and Europe?
The simple answer is absolutely yes. And again, I point to the kind of graphics that we're probably all now familiar with. The closure of airspace over Ukraine, over Russia, now over Iran. I mean, the South Caucasus, particularly Azerbaijan, are absolutely essential as a conduit between East and West. I will say that I have heard, in terms of developing new corridors between Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan. I mean, I've heard some comments that are saying that this is completely unrealistic, it will never happen, and that high value goods, let's say electronics and such, coming from China are sent by air. So land corridor is less important. I take a very, very different view. I mean, really, I think the answer to the importance of this region is what we make of it. And in the same way that the BTC didn't need to be dreamt up. I mean, it was a real idea. I think it was a visionary idea, especially on the part of President Haidar Aliyev in the 1990s. We're possibly seeing the same now. And the existing capacity now is small, but it's not a question of now. It's the will, it's the investment, it's the imagination. So that if we do build significant infrastructure that can carry serious cargo, also perhaps allow for value added in the region so that primary goods that are possibly coming through the corridor have transformation to them so that they're worth more and so on. This is an absolutely enormous change and a long-term change. So I hope I'm indicating, I'm very dismissive of the several comments I've heard saying that this corridor really doesn't matter or won't amount to anything. I concede that to some, on paper, it doesn't look real, but I think this is a phenomenal opportunity. And we look at it now as we do, say, 30 years on to the developments in the region starting in the 1990s.
Right. With instability growing across the Gulf and the wider Middle East, does the Zangezur corridor become even more important as part of a resilient East-West connectivity network?
Yeah, the simple answer there, absolutely. And that really should encourage multiple parties to pursue that. I mean, a lot of TRIP looks to be something that will be done by private companies. Usually private companies want stability and security. I would really hope that there's continued political backing for TRIP's development. And yes, it would have an enormous impact on the region. And it is really saying to disruptive or revisionist powers in the region that there is much wider international interest in developing the South Caucasus. So in that way, TRIP is very important in itself, and it's additionally important considering what has happened now in terms of Iran and that on top of Ukraine, Russia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time. Thank you for joining KZZ Talks.
Okay, thank you.